artificial intelligence, the stock market, by God, the economy as a whole are all demons. The internet is made of demons. The whole world is full of them. Not real ones. Well, maybe they are, but we'll get to that later. Demons can take many forms, ranging from the regular kind who will do horrible things to you, to this fella called Leonard, who may provide assistance in agriculture. Through the ages, many have attempted to define demons, their desires, where they may be found, and so on, and have compiled them into works establishing the field of demonology. Today, I will argue that many fields pertinent to modern day life are just demonology, and that through this, there are demons everywhere for those with eyes to see. But before we can do that, we must define exactly what a demon is. And to do that, we have to talk about Demonology is a fascinating field of study and has taken many forms all around the world, typically being a subdivision of the study of religion. It is a necessary field because it teaches us which one of our neighbors is a witch and how we can kill them. The foremost field among them is, of course, Christian demonology. However, you will find that Christian demonology is very strange and quite different to what you would expect. One such peculiarity is the obsessive focus on numbers, particularly the precise count of demons. Famed pre-demonologist Alonso de Espina would have you think that there are exactly 133,316,666 demons, while Johann Weyer proposed a far more modest 4,439,622. The Book of Enoch says there are only 200. So, they also catalog how many legions each demon monarch leads, and whether or not those demons teach the liberal arts, which, for some reason, a great many do. In the interest of not getting bogged down in a single understanding of demons, I have hence attempted to draw from a wider field of research than just Christian demonology alone. If our understanding of demons was just defined by their capacity to lead legions, and whether or not they can teach the liberal arts, this video would perhaps become too interesting. So now, I stake myself out as a budding demonologist. With the support of my eunuch advisors, I will use my understanding of the field to carve out a definition of how exactly a demon functions and how that can be applied to the rest of your life. Now, you might be thinking, Davey, in order for you to define a demon, you would have to have some sort of expertise in the area of demonology. But I do not think so. What makes this guy an expert? And where is he getting his numbers from? Do you think he personally counted all 4,439,622 demons? I don't think so. Matter of fact, I don't think he ever saw a demon in his life. Most all historic demonologists would be drawing from either religious folklore or the first-hand accounts of the small, insular, and uneducated population of the pre-modern world who also probably saw no demons. So from where I'm standing, or sitting, it looks like I'm just doing the same thing. And I have access to Wikipedia, so if nothing else, the insular and uneducated population I get my stories from is not small. As mentioned earlier, demons come in many forms, but in my opinion, many of them share a lot in common as far as their relationship with humanity goes. While they may differ wildly in some ways, they are for the most part going to behave relatively similarly. In particular, they of course all have a very strong relationship with human suffering. So, we are going to examine a number of demons from across the globe and group them into a couple of prevailing archetypes that make it clear that this relationship with suffering is what makes a demon a demon. So let's do that. First, we have the demon as a harbinger of suffering to come. This is a fairly common expression of naughty spirits that can be seen in many cultures across the world. They linger around when something bad is about to happen or are a driving force in its arrival, so when you see them, you know misfortune is to come. A good example of this is the Japanese Akuma, who, when spotted, will signal to a community that bad things are near. As such, people sometimes associate the disarray that comes with mental illness with the presence of Akuma. Another variety of this archetype can be seen in the southeastern European Ala, who are not only a sign of things to come, but actively herald them forth, being demons who lead destructive weather. As such, their presence is a sign of annihilation coming to your location. They would also like to eat the sun, which would not be good. Next is demons as a tempter of suffering. This is a very common archetype of demon in Christian demonological study. They are most known for coercing individuals, typically using promises of prosperity into performing actions which will bring about suffering. The greatest example of this is the demon Moloch, who in the Bible demanded child sacrifice, making his followers thrust dire suffering upon themselves as part of their service to him. Similar to this is demons as a bargainer of suffering, who will offer an individual release from their suffering at an unclear cost. The fictional demon Mephistopheles is a great example of this archetype, being best known for tempting humans into pacts that would for a time seem to bring great happiness, but would eventually wear away at them, revealing the emptiness of a life made of unearned prosperity, leading them to an even greater suffering than they had initially experienced, and also thereby cutting them off from God. Next, we have the demon as a personification of suffering. These demons are not necessarily particularly active, but serve more as an accumulation of suffering as a feeling or concept. An example of this is Aklis, a Greek spirit who appears in moments of profound grief, almost as a fog before the eyes, taking a horrific form to match the horror of loss. A similar idea to this is the Zoroastrian spirit Ahriman, who conceptually personifies the opposite of godliness. For example, where Zoroaster, their god, would align humanity with an enjoyment of life, Ahriman accumulates as the opposite of this, pure suffering, and so it is in this domain of pure suffering that he will be found. Finally, there are demons as a direct cause of suffering, like Larage, who simply enjoy forcing suffering into the world. They will cause great battles, sow discord between friends, make infections fester in wounds, and so on, just generally being a real jerk, with the suffering that comes from these actions benefiting these demons in some unclear way. There are also, of course, the inordinate number of demons who, like Leonard, teach the liberal arts, so I suppose we can add teacher of liberal arts as one of the archetypes. How that relates to suffering should be very clear. Those are all of my demons. Of course, I could go on. There are thousands of demons with thousands of different behaviors, and I am clearly only scratching the surface, but I think the point has been made clear enough that the defining aspect of a demon is their relationship to suffering. All of their behavior is in some way related to suffering, and if a supernatural force does not bear that attribute, you wouldn't call it a demon. Thus, I think we can confidently say that demons accumulate around the suffering of humanity. Whether they are actually causing the actions which lead to this suffering or just consistently exist in proximity to it, their manifestation in the world is directly correlated with the existence of suffering. This is important to establish because it helps us understand how demons function. So then, how exactly do demons function? You may conclude that demons existed before humanity, but that is irrelevant. Without human suffering to manifest them, they do not exist in the human conscious. Perhaps they linger about, but as far as we are concerned, we cannot see them. They do not exist. Since suffering is a precondition to their existence, we should imagine them not as causes of suffering, but as consequences of suffering. However, their existence also serves to create more suffering and perpetuates it. In this way, demons operate in a sort of feedback loop, where they do not exist until suffering brings them forth, and through that suffering they are empowered. And through power they can create more suffering, thereby empowering them further, allowing them to create more suffering, and so on. Even if we are to imagine demons as a purely figurative representation of evil and not a truly real being, this still holds true. A demon is a name and a face being put to something we fear, and by believing in it, we perpetuate that fear is a threat. Without this fear, this little suffering, the demon would not matter to us. We would forget about it, and it would cease to exist. Accelerationist philosopher Nick Land conceptualized a very similar idea in reference to culture that he called hyperstition. In his words, hyperstition is a positive feedback circuit including culture as a component. It can be defined as the experimental technoscience of self-fulfilling prophecies. Superstitions are merely false beliefs, but hyperstitions, by their very existence as ideas, function causally to bring about their own reality. In simple words, hyperstitions are self-fulfilling ideas that become real because they influence reality to create their own existence. Where a superstition is a false belief, a hyperstition is a belief that becomes real only because we believe in it. An example Land gives for hyperstitious thought is capitalist economics, where the confidence that something will work is often the primary reason that it does. Take the stock market. Why does the funny line go up? Because the company has proven that it is worth more. How? Well, we think that it did, so it did. And just so, a lack of faith can just as easily remove something from reality. I think we should view demons not as superstitions, but as hyperstitions that operate through suffering. They are forces that are only real insofar as they can perpetuate themselves, and they perpetuate through the existence of suffering. So now we have an understanding of demons in hand. What demons exist today? Again, on Land's example of capitalist economics, I think we should return to the stock market. A necessary component of the stock market's ability to perpetuate itself into reality is its ability to create suffering. In stocks, one cannot make great wealth without risking a fall into great poverty. And even when one succeeds, we have all seen the transformation of our wealthiest citizens into hollow ghouls driven forth by an insatiable greed. The stock market is a demon, a self-fulfilling idea propelled by its ability to grant power and suffering in equal parts, and it demands a great sacrifice. And just like any good demon, the stock market has its worshippers, those willing to sacrifice everything to the demon who offers them prosperity in return. There are very literal examples of this. Take the GME community, who are by all definitions a cult, waiting for this stock that they've invested their entire lives into to deliver them into wealth beyond measure, like some apocalyptic prophecy of old. Now, if you think I'm stretching the definition of demon a bit far, you'll be surprised to find that this perspective is rooted in old demonology. In the ancient Testament of Solomon, a text from which a great deal of Christian demonology is derived, we are told the story of King Solomon seeking holy guidance when one of his subjects has half of his pay stolen and his vitality sucked out of his thumb, both by a demon. Hearing Solomon's calls, the heavens deliver him a ring decorated with the seal of God that grants him the power to command demons, which he then uses on the demon prince Beelzebul, thereby granting him power over a large population of lesser demons. With this power, he forces the demons into a tremendous workforce, which he then utilizes to build his temple. Why do I bring this up? Well, we can understand the Testament of Solomon as a story about the powers of industry, that carefully, Solomon was able to harness these chaotic forces to perform an act of construction that was otherwise impossible without their help. And in this way, perhaps we can similarly understand demons like the stock market. They are violent and capable of great destruction, but if bound and utilized with care, they are capable of assisting us in performing acts far beyond ordinary human capability. This is, however, only half the story. The Testament of Solomon ends with the ever-wise king being tempted to worship the demons Moloch and Remphan in exchange for sex, and upon making a sacrifice to them, God abandons him. He is made a fool, and his name becomes a joke. Can you think of anyone else who was capable of harnessing the chaotic powers of industry but ultimately saw their downfall through the temptations of sex? What about all of them? Another clear example of a modern demon is, of course, artificial intelligence. We are currently in an AI arms race, with each global superpower scrambling to develop it and control it. Yes, partly out of ambition, but also out of fear. Fear of falling behind, of being replaced, and of being outmatched. But why is it that AI inspires such urgency? Because of its immense destructive potential. It is a dangerous power, and clearly in a world where demons are going to roam, you want to be the one bearing the seal of God. Yet this very cycle of fear and suffering is what drives its creation. Essentially, we are saying, this thing, if it becomes real, could cause immense suffering. Which is scary, so we have no choice but to make it real. And this doesn't just apply to AI. We could say the same thing about nuclear research, genetic engineering, autonomous weapons. The list goes on. Sounds like a bunch of fucking demons to me. But again, I judge not. As Solomon displayed, these powers can be used for good. While we're on the subject of AI, here's an interesting story. In 2022, as text-to-image AI models began to rise in popularity, artist Steph Marge Swanson began to test the effects of negative prompt weights. A prompt weight is a modifier that you place on the words or ideas that you feed to an AI when generating something. So if I made an AI generate an image of a cat and the face of God, I might add additional weight on the face of God to give it more precedence in the image. By using a negative prompt weight, Steph would be asking the AI to produce the opposite of her prompt. So in testing, she wrote this prompt, thereby requesting an image that was the opposite of Marlon Brando. And it delivered this, a fairly innocuous AI-generated logo. So then she wrote this prompt, requesting the opposite of the logo, presumably to see if it would then produce an image of Marlon Brando. Instead, it delivered this, which is fairly alarming. But then, with further testing, she was able to produce quite a lot of different images of this face. Seemingly, this budding AI, which was not very good at producing many things, had a very strong ability to produce this face. Now, what is the reason for this? Well, Steph speculates that given the tendency of this face to be generated within images that have an aura of violence or gore about them, that the AI, being trained on all of the imagery that can be found on the internet, was attempting to generate gruesome images. But with the AI being restricted from making this kind of imagery, it was then pulling its data from whatever was closest to violence or gore without actually breaking the rules, which was, for whatever reason, this face. Gruesome imagery is just suffering put to film, a digital photocopy of all of humanity's worst traits. One might say, spontaneously forming in this pool of horrible data, a demon found its face. Now we must address the elephant in the room. You might want to argue, Davey, clearly demons have never been real in the literal sense, but have always just been a figural representation of the darker side of humanity, a personified warning to help us avoid patterns of self-sabotage and evil. And I would say, congratulations, you have understood the video. If demons aren't real, then how do you explain this? But never mind all of that, here is something fun. In the Lesser Key of Solomon, a 17th century grimoire based on the Testament of Solomon, which we spoke about earlier, the sigils of 72 high-ranking demons are depicted. These sigils are essentially a pictorial representation of their true names and are supposed to be used in magic involving these demons. Recently, people have begun to notice that Apple's emojis bear a striking resemblance to these sigils. Which is true. So make of that what you will. To conclude, demons are real. And not in the figurative sense. Leonard visited me in the night. This is my 4th video, and I hope you enjoyed. Last month, when I made a video about incels, I bore the wrath of the incel community. So hopefully I do not do the same today, because the wrath of a demon would probably be considerably worse. A heartfelt thanks to the numerous individuals who liked, commented, and subscribed following my last video. Your support is very gracious, and I hope I can continue to please. I will be trying to produce a new video on at least a monthly basis, so keep your eyes open. See you!